Fáilte, welcome. My name is Dr. Karen Ward and I'm delighted to be here with you for another edition of Mind Your Precious Self. And the topic this time is stress and how to cope. I come here to talk to you because my father sent me. Now that sounds really sweet. Oh my gosh, her father recommended that she come and speak on stress and how to cope. It's very admirable. But would you be surprised if I told you that my father died over 12 years ago? And he died of a heart attack ostensibly. But of course, we in the family know that he died of stress. He was a businessman, and there were many recessions back in those days. And of course, he had 6 children. There was an awful lot going on, trying to provide, to feed, clothe, and educate us all. At the very tender age of my early 20s, I realised that I was going to have to learn how to cope with stress, my triggers, what it was, and most importantly, how to keep it at bay. Now, it is important to say that stress is part of life. And just like there are so-called good emotions of love, joy, all of those wonderful, positive attributes that we love, and of course, we recognise that there are other emotions, jealousy, anger, hate, all of these ones that we don't like as much, but they are part of life. And similarly, we must realise that stress is a normal part of life. But if I have my day, I wake up in the morning, I'm very relaxed, and I come up to my working level, and then I have a deadline or it's a bit busy, I will spike up to a little bit of stress, and then I'll ease down back to the working level, and then later on I'll drop down to that very deep, restful sleep. That is completely normal. However, what I'm talking about is when we are constantly at that high stress level, and it affects our breathing, it affects our judgment, and most importantly, it will eventually affect our weak point in our body system. Now, our weak point could be something genetic. For example, there might be a history of heart disease in the family, or lung conditions, or cancer, or reaching for comfort, which might become addictions. And they will play up, and then this will have huge health implications. When I say stress is a killer, that's what I mean. That it can have those very, very debilitating effects. Now, I'm not telling you this to scare you in any way. I'm telling you this as a heads up. And I'm going to bring a really interesting analogy that you might be very familiar with or could be new. Perhaps you've watched some of these amazing National Geographic programs, or maybe there's a David Attenborough program where we see antelope in their savanna of Africa munching away on grass. Everything's calm and peaceful. And suddenly we see a lion approach, and the lion picks out perhaps the antelope at the side of the herd and begins the chase. Now we're watching the television, our heart palpitating, oh my God. And the antelope is racing along, the lion behind, comes to a bit of a river, the antelope jumps over, and then we realize the lion doesn't follow. Oh, now maybe the lion wasn't as hungry as it thought it was. Perhaps it doesn't want to get its paws wet in the river, or maybe he realizes the antelope's a bit faster than me. But what happens next is fascinating. The antelope goes into a frenzy of shaking. Looks like it's having some form of a seizure. And we watch, and then suddenly the antelope stops moving, shaking, is completely on a reset, and goes back to nibble the grass. Now we're probably watching with our heart in our mouths. Oh my gosh. But the antelope has released the adrenaline, the stress, and gone back to neutral. What's happened to the antelope happens to us, Hugh. We have a response: fight, flight, or freeze. So when something comes to us, if it was back in the day a dinosaur, we'd fight the dinosaur, we'd run away from the dinosaur, or we'd freeze like rabbits caught in headlights. But we don't live in that world anymore. And yet our physiological response is the same. If we're at work and the deadlines pile on, we might find ourselves not fighting, but building up anger, resentment, frustration. Or we might not run away, flight, but we could zone out. Like we're still physically there, but we're not really with it. Or we might freeze and just numb out. The fight, flight, or freeze response is necessary. Otherwise, we'd walk out under a bus or we would walk into danger. Whatever happens, though, is if we've had in our formative years a trauma of some description, maybe it was a car accident or a big row or something major, and the fight, flight, freeze response comes in, unless, like the antelope, we've released it, we can now be on high stress levels all the time. And that's dangerous because it will affect us physiologically and it'll affect how we are in the world. So what can we do? How can we recognize normal stress? How can we recognize a buildup of stress? And what are the coping mechanisms? Well, there's an interesting theory that if your stress response is one of anxiety, back in the day, for me, it was panic attacks, it's generally to do with the future. And it might be, I'll never get that done. I'll never be good enough. There's a catastrophizing about the future. Or it might be to do with the past. In other words, it could be that there's a depression, something in the past as dragging you down to feel a very low, sad, blue response. And in that way, there can be a sense of needing to look at what's happened in the past, to learn from it, to deal with it, and then to move beyond it. And of course, you can do this in a number of ways. Maybe you journal, write it out, or you could sit down with a friend or a family member, somebody who's trusted, who's a good listener. Or indeed, you might go and seek a professional, be that a counsellor, a psychotherapist, a psychologist. And some people often say to me, oh, I'm not sure if I want to go to one of those. But I'm one of those. We come in all shapes and sizes. There is another way of looking at this. Long term, on a day when you're very relaxed and calm, is to get out a piece of paper and to really look at what you can do to help. In other words, are my stress triggers some things from the past? Are my stress triggers catastrophizing about the future? Am I under too much pressure at work or at home or deadlines? And to really, from a place of calmness, figure out what you can do. Maybe you don't need to be working that hard. Maybe there is a wiser way of dealing with the bills or that financial aspect that you're in. And this is where help might come in, the listener again. For example, if you have a credit card bill, if you have a bank overdraft, if you feel, oh my gosh, my what I'm doing at work can never pay for this, you might go to what we have here in Ireland, a place called MABS, and in that way they sit with you, financial advisors, and they say, get a credit union loan, which is a lower interest rate, pay off the overdraft, pay off the credit card, pay off the loan shark, and then seriously look, perhaps you could ask for a promotion at work, or maybe there's a little part-time job you could take, Or perhaps you could look at letting go some perceived luxuries that you might have that you don't need. It's surprising what we often end up paying for every month without realizing that there's an outgoing there that we don't actually need. Help is at hand. The other one is deadlines. Personally, I work very well to deadlines, but if you said to me, oh, Karen, listen, I'm going to give you a month to do that, I guarantee you I will dawdle away the month, and the last 3 days I will, I have to get this done, and there'll be a bit of a panic on. I recognize as well that I used to impose deadlines on myself. If you asked me, oh, could you do that, Karen? I'd say, yes, of course, I'll do it for you tomorrow. Then I'd look at my diary and realize there's no way I could possibly do that in the time given. However, I might be too proud to go back to you and ask for an extension. Or I might recognize, did I say I'd do it in that fast amount of time because I want to impress you? I want to get attention from you. I want you to think I'm marvelous, which will massage my ego. Or was I just not thinking without checking in with what I actually need to do? So again, they were ways that I really found hugely helped with my stress levels. Now let's talk about what we can do in the moment when those stress triggers come. Breathing. Literally, excuse me, I need to go to the toilet. Off you go down the seat. 10 slow, deep breaths, bringing extra oxygen into your body, sending a clear message up through your nervous system to calm the mind, to calm the energy, and bringing down the adrenaline levels that are flooding into the body from your adrenal glands and sitting on top of the kidneys. There are also ways where we can, like the antelope shaking, release a buildup of tension, bring ourselves back to reset. And that can be yelling at your football team, going, the way the teenagers goes on those roller coasters, and it's scary. You think, why are they going to these, horror houses and the carnivals? But the screaming and the laughing and the roaring is a release, just like at those sporting activities. But we can do something else. We can do heavy gardening, cycling, swimming, very active forms of exercise that will also bring in that release. I have a lovely one. I'm very much into film, and I love the concept of what's called the weepy movie. So I'm watching the film and I'm crying with the characters. Oh my gosh, that's so sad. But I'm releasing what I couldn't release if I was just sitting normally. But because of the film, I've got an opportunity to really, really let that go, which is very freeing. And then I'm back to reset, just like the antelope in the field. A wonderful way of coming back to that reset. And then there are certain ways of maintaining how we keep stress levels at bay. Yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, breath work, dancing, painting, hobbies, interests, reading. It can be whatever works for you. Personally, I'm a bit of a yoga gal and I love to walk in nature. It really restores and rejuvenates me and brings me back to reset. And that way, the stress levels don't rise because I nip them in the bud. Back in the day, I used to have panic attacks and I would be convinced I went from 0 to 10 very, very quickly. 10 being the panic attack, 0 being I'm fine. But in fact, what happened was I didn't. This was all in my head. I began to chart that 1 was speaking a little bit faster than I usually do. 2 was sweaty palms. 3 a little bit of palpitations. 4, my breath began to go funny. 5, I began to drop things and become clumsy, and so on. And rather than go into full-blown panic attack mode, where you're convinced you're having a heart attack, very scary, I recognized that once I started to speak faster, once my hands got clammy, I'd excuse myself from company, or whatever I was doing, I'd stop, breathe, and go and do one of those reset yoga, walking, whatever it might be, sustain me. And then I also recommend something called fake it till you make it. This is quite interesting. It brings in your acting skills. In other words, if you feel that sense of stress rising, put a big smile on your face and go and continue whatever you're doing. And the smile will elicit a smile from others, and it will have a feel of relaxing your body, bring that message to your mind and emotions. It's time to calm. And although you started out pretending that you were relaxed, in fact, very soon that natural response will come in to your body. So the old fake it till you make it certainly works. So let's see what we have. There's normal stress, check. There's long-term stress, fight, flight, or freeze in particular, that we need to have a look at so it doesn't affect ourselves long-term and our health implications. And we can, like the antelope, find ways to release the buildup of stress through exercise, through tears, through gardening, whatever hobby sustains you. And then we can look at the maintenance, be that meditation, yoga, qigong, tai chi, some sort of really hobby that sustains you. We may need to make a plan and to look at anything in our past that can come back to issues that are not dealt with. In other words, some trauma or something that happened before that is in the back of our mind, and talking to a professional or a friend or a family member can really do wonders with that. Or you might decide, I'm going to tap in with a couple of sessions for a professional counsellor just to clear the decks. And the Irish Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy have a fantastic list of members that you can tap in with, and every country in the world will have its version. Stress, part of life. Overwhelm, not necessary. We do not need to have this as part of our everyday existence. We can have that smooth way of life with a small spike back to smoothness, and we can inbuild into our everyday routine ways to maintain a calm demeanor and ways to overcome the normal stress. I hope that has been helpful to you. I'm very thankful to my dad for bringing me here to talk about this. And if in a small way this has been helpful to you, well then it will be been well worthwhile. Mille brichas, 1,000 thanks, agus slán go fóill. Goodbye until the next time.